I am so honored today to have our guest speaker, Tonatiuh, who is one of the lead actors from the show Promised Land. I met him through Clubhouse when he came along with the cast to speak to us about this amazing show. But he took a little bit of interest in what I do. So we had a conversation and I invited him to the show to talk about his own experiences with bullying and how he has been able to overcome. And so I hope that you really like this discussion. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast. It's such a pleasure. And let me tell you, I'm still like fanning, what is it, the term fangirling?
Yeah.
Yeah. Still, like last time when we spoke, I really, I think I was still up in the clouds because I'm a big fan of you and the character you play in Promised Land. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So let's get started. I invited you to come on so that we could talk about your bullying experiences. And you might be wondering why I asked you that, right? I feel like when kids watch a big star, they never assume that they've been through some trials and tribulations. And so you're young and you appeal to a lot of our youth today who are very active, and I love that. So I figured, hearing your story could help somebody. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, or maybe a few ideas of how you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born in Boyle Heights, and then I moved to East LA like at a fairly young age, and I went to school for a few years there. It was a predominantly Latina community, which comes with its own culture around what masculinity looks like, around what gender norms are for individuals, right? I was always very like sweet and effeminate, and I enjoyed playing with dolls and just loved telling stories. But that had consequences for just being, I don't know, like people were really aggressive, and there were some physical altercations, there were a lot of verbal altercations. It was challenging because I didn't know why. Like I felt like I felt as if I did something wrong, but all I was doing was being myself, if that made sense. And so that logic was like butting heads, because obviously like any child or any person really, you just want to belong, or you want to be a part of it, the moment, whatever. And so it was really difficult to navigate why, or even figure out a reason why. And so I remember like coming home from school some days as a kid, like almost hyperventilating and asking my mom, like, why don't people like me? Like, I don't get it, And I think eventually I uttered what's wrong with me. Because it does, I think the bullying and all of that starts playing into your own psychology, right? And how you view yourself. So eventually I started becoming very, not aggressive, but definitely defensive, very sensitive to any form of criticism, even if it was like something like, you forgot to take out the trash, and like that to me would read as like a huge insult as a kid, because it was just another thing that I couldn't get right, if that made sense. But it had nothing to do with it, but because of the conditioning, because of the feelings that you get as a kid, it starts compiling. It becomes a little bit more intense.
Yeah, wow. So how old were you? What's your earliest memory when you started noticing how people were treating you?
I mean, honestly, since like preschool, kindergarten, was pretty rough. And then I think it got really hard around 2nd or 3rd grade. And then 4th grade, I moved schools and it started picking back up. But I think that like I got smart enough to know to defend myself sooner before letting it become like a habit of other people, if that made sense.
Yeah.
But it was hard. It was challenging because, like, weirdly enough, the victim ends up getting in trouble.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like the victim would get, like, I would defend myself, but I would get in trouble for defending myself. And so then the question was like, wait, where's the logic or the justice here? Like, I'm not the one who threw the first punch, so why am I the one who's getting in trouble?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so there was a lot of inadvertent gaslighting from administration because of that. Because in their eyes, they don't know the full story. A child doesn't really understand, doesn't have the full language, I think, to communicate, no, like, this is a system of oppression. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're perpetuating violence, you're gaslighting the victim. Like,
Exactly.
you know, that's not really language that a child has. And so it was challenging. It was really challenging. And learning to separate and go back to me before the trauma, right? Was a challenge. It was a challenge for a few years. And then in high school, I had made the decision that I was just going to radically love myself and not give a crap about what anyone felt about me. And instead of swinging, like, if I went from like one end of the pedestal to the other, or pendulum, not pedestal, pendulum, to the other, it went from like trying to be as invisible as possible to being like as in your face, unapologetically queer femme, like, person as possible, as a way to buttress it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that was because of a friend of mine, Michael. He was a senior when I was a freshman, and he was so unapologetically femme. He was also 6'1" or 6'2", and like easily 190 pounds or 80, 90, whatever. Sorry, Michael, if this is insulting for talking about your weight. But like he was physically like intimidating, so nobody messed with him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so like none of the, like, my bullies, I was like 120 pounds and like skinny, you know, kid. So my bullies wouldn't say anything to me. I mean, they wouldn't say anything to him, but they would say stuff to me. And so then when I was like, man, he just doesn't care. Like, and if someone says something, he'll just sit on them and like, it's done.
Your bodyguard.
Yeah, well, no, to him. But so then I took on that attitude. I took on the, like, if he can be like, I don't give a crap, then I can be, I don't give a crap.
Mm-hmm. So you're telling me that you simply observed him and you just kind of like, you know, mimicked the way he carried himself, and that motivated you to just love yourself and carry yourself differently? Or did you actually go to him at one point and befriend him, and he ended up?
We were friends.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we were friends. Yeah, we were definitely friends. His parents were a lesbian couple, and they took us out to gay pride, like, really young. I think I was like 14 or 15 when I went to gay pride Los Angeles. And it was just wild to me because it was such a different world. And I think because his parents were also queer, they loved him without the need to censor him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's so important for parents to understand that they have to show the love that, like, that completely, what is that word? No strings attached, and just let them be, because that in its own can help children just love themselves and be very confident. But I want to go back to a few things actually that you said that is so important, and it's very common in the study that I do of bullying. You said it started in pre-K or kinder?
Yeah.
Pre-K, right? Which at that time you're 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Really young. A lot of parents ask me, well, how young can children bully? And I always tell them that early, and they're always like, no, that can't be. But here you are, right? And I know that many other children have experienced that. And I know that it's really hard for children, like you said, they don't have the vocabulary, which is another thing. Like you used, gaslighting. What child, 4 or 5 years old, 6, even 10-year-olds sometimes don't know what gaslighting means. And you also mentioned that you ended up being the victim. And so you became pretty much angry or didn't know how to express all of that frustration of what was going on. So during this time, were you telling your parents or friend or a close family member? And if you were telling them, how did they help you?
They had their own way of helping. And I think that, sometimes no one teaches you how to be an adult.
Yeah.
No one teaches you how to be a parent. No one teaches you, like, to be an adult, almost, you have to understand the red tape of the scholastic, or the academic sphere. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't know that I had to communicate this. Or if I check the ESL box, I automatically get put, you know what I mean? Like, right. If we speak Spanish at home, I get placed in ESL. Like, there's so much red tape that nobody teaches you. And I think that when you're an immigrant into this country, you're figuring it out even harder because there's a language barrier, or there's, so much otherness that you aren't really sure how to deal with. And so I think that, like, they would tell you to like behave, mm-hmm. or to not draw too much attention to yourself, or even like teachers weren't really sure how to make it stop because they can't control people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that it's a bit of a challenge. And I think that mentally, I was very smart as a kid. And so I was able to pick up on, oh, okay, like this behavior will elicit this kind of thing, or if I do this, then this will happen, or whatever. And so I learned to condition myself, to act and behave in a certain way. But no, I don't know if there's any one way of expressing it. And I also think that, like, the interesting thing that I find about the word bullying is, like, I think comedy is a type of bully. It can be like insult comics and stuff like that. And so there's a fine line between a joke and comedy and humiliation, if that makes sense. And so it's a really, really fine line, and especially I think in Latina communities, like, oh, yeah. That line is blurred.
Very.
people dunk on you, and it's for comedy, but it also like can hurt,
Yeah.
And I myself am guilty of it. I think the older that I've gotten, I've realized that some of my comedy is very aligned with like almost bullying. It teeters that gentle line. And for me, the distinction is I'll try never to go after a person for their way of being, but I can for the way of acting.
Okay. Yes. Oh,
that's something.
Yes, I love how you put that. And you're right. We're not really taught to be an adult because that's something you have to experience. And of course, parents try their best. Like I always tell my kids, I'm getting ready, to send you out into adult world. So you need to do this and that and whatever. But just like when you go study something in university, you can go ahead and get a master's, a PhD, but unless you're implementing it, then you really don't have that experience and you don't know. Because they're two different, totally separate things. And, it's interesting you say, the Latina community, we do have a lot of things that we say. Sometimes it's terms of endearment. I remember for a long time, my sister le decíamos mi chaparrita y mi gordita because she was a chubby baby. She was very, very short. And as she got older, of course, she was taller and slimmed out. But we called her that. And I remember one day she just got really angry and she said, stop it. I hate that. I hate that because until she told me that, She said, I don't like it because I feel like I'm still that, and of course, usually it's a negative thing to call somebody, gordita. So that was an eye-opener. And I think we have a lot of that in La Familia. And believe it or not, there's so many people, when I tell them this, they're so resistant to it. And they're like, no, that's ridiculous. Se lo digo con cariño. And so what would you say to parents or family members who say, pero se lo digo con cariño? It's a term of endearment.
Well, I think that there's a difference between intention and effect.
Right.
Right. I can intend to decírtelo con cariño. It is received as an insult. Mm-hmm. So it's like, good try. Thank you for the intention. It didn't work. But if you do want to like tell me something with cariño, here's the list of the words that I do like to be called. You know what I mean? And I think that it goes, because there's a certain level of like confianza que tenemos con familia, no? And it's funny because even on like shows like Promised Land, like all of us were Latina. And when I tell you that we are a family, like we really were or are a family, but we joke around like Latina people do. And so there were a few times where I was like, are these jokes? You know what I mean? But like not, and of course we all there was like a collective understanding that the intention behind the jokes was with good faith, right? There was a generosity of assumption there. Mm-hmm. However, I think that even within the nuclear family, like with Latina folk, it's like learning to have boundaries, it's a twofold thing, right? Like the person who feels upset has to have the courage enough and the belief and trust that their family will receive this well. And so when they say, hey, actually that kind of hurts, they have to be able to set that boundary and explain why it hurts and like what they don't like about it. The person who's getting that feedback also has to assume they're not being sensitive. This is just something that they don't like. And because I love them, I will respect it. Right? But I think that dance gets lost, mm-hmm. And because we're family, I can kind of say what I want and I can kind of, get away with certain things. But then the question that I start proposing is like, is our relationships unconditional? And my answer is no. I don't believe that there are. I don't think that there's unconditional love. Sure, I'll still love you. I'll show mercy to you. I'll show kindness to you. If you come knocking on my door and there's an emergency, like I'll let you in. That is not a relationship make. Right? A relationship is an ongoing conversation. A relationship is supposed to lead to fun and joy and love. And so if you're in a space where you're constantly feeling like you have to defend yourself, or you constantly feel like uncomfortable because you're just going to take private information and use it against me, then like, no, that's not a relationship. That's another form of abuse.
Right. Social bullying. Yeah.
Yeah. I would just say like, it's just, to me, it's a form of, it's emotional abuse, whether you see it as that or not.
Right. Yeah. Those are very, very good points. I think it's important that people understand that what you said, right? It's about the receiver, and that it does take a lot of courage to say, hey, every time that you call me this, it makes me feel really bad. Can you please stop? And sometimes family members honor it and sometimes don't. And I love how you explain it. I wish I could repeat it exactly verbatim how you said it.
Well, good thing we have it recorded.
Yes, thank goodness. But yes, you have to honor that from the family member. So, looking back at your experiences with bullying, do you feel like it shaped you? I know you mentioned at first you wanted to be very invisible. I can relate to that. When I was being bullied, me too, for a long time, because the more visible you feel, the more you feel like you're going to be targeted. And so you learn how to love yourself. But was there a specific event, anything that happened that made that little light bulb come on and say, hey, I've got to just leave that in the past? and love myself and
Yeah.
move forward.
Yeah, there was a series of events. I can't just like pinpoint one, right? But I don't know, I was always like a very good student in the sense that I had really good perception that something was wrong. And so then I would go and try to figure out what that exactly would be. And I realized quickly when I went to university that I missed out on some privileges that other people had, some life experiences that other people had, because I felt a need to other myself as a form of protection, right? And there was a certain expectation that they had that the world was theirs. Like, the expectation was people will treat me with respect, people will treat me with love, people will treat me with, like, opportunities are available to me. And I didn't have that inherently. Like, I had I have to fight for love, I have to fight for respect, I have to fight for this, I have to fight for that. And there was a certain level of like white knuckling that I was going through life, that when they were just open-handed, right? And I didn't know how else to explain it, but that was what it felt like. Like, I was everything I had to fight for, and that was the go-to. And they were just like, yes, please, thank you. You know, very different energies. And with my acting work, because acting is a lot of, at least for me, I can't, speak for everybody, but for me, it was a lot of looking at the internal map and dissecting it, because at the end of the day, all we really are is consciousness, in my mind. Like, that's all we are. Everything other than that is a story that we've accepted. So, like, the clothes that we wear, the way that we speak, the language we use, the accents, everything else is just a selection of things that we have accumulated over time and have chosen that I am that thing. And so as I was like stripping away stuff that I was like, well, am I my voice? No, I can go higher, or I can go lower, or I can, whatever. I realized that, like, what happened to me wasn't me. The bullying had nothing to do with me. They had internalized or they had homophobia, or they had misogyny, or they were misogynists, right? Like, they had issues with me, but those issues weren't me. I was not the problem, right? And so I still didn't know, like, great, figured that out, now what? So then I was like, okay, let me grab a notebook. And I took inventory of every painful memory that I could think of.
Wow.
And made a list of every person that I had a negative feeling towards. Literally, bullet point list, like pop, 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 pop. And it was hefty. It was quite a few people. And I started with the most painful person. And I wrote down everything negative I could think about them. Everything, like, possible, from like really grievous offenses that anyone would find negative to the stupidest things, like, I don't like that you smell. I don't know. I can't. I can't. I'm not going to give a specific example, but I went through everything until I had nothing negative left to say. And then I forced myself to say positive things about them.
Oh, I love this.
What good did they contribute to my life? And some of them was like, oh, well, because I'm getting emotional. Because you hurt me, I got closer to this person. Because you hurt me, or because this happened, I ended up focusing more on school and getting a scholarship. Because because this happened, it forced me to do that, because like, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
I was like, oh, despite it being painful that you existed in my life, there were still positive things that came from it. So it was all the negative, all the positive things that I could think of. And then I said, I forgive you for, and I just wrote down, I forgive you for this, and I forgive you for that, and I forgive you for that. And I wasn't forgiving them for them, I was forgiving them for myself, because I was carrying a pretty heavy weight. And then at the end of it, I've said, I'm sorry for,
Wow.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote, I'm sorry for this, and I'm sorry for that, because I also participated in some of these instances. In some of them I didn't, and I was just like, I'm sorry that you felt that you had to do that, but like, I tried my best, you know? And so my conscience was like wiping clean. And then once I finished it, I did like just about everybody. And once I finished it, people that I wanted to have and continue a relationship with, I explained to them what my experience was with them in a non-attacky way, but more so like, you have an impact in my life, you know, and that's not the type of relationship that I'd like to have with you. And I don't know what kind of relationship you'd like to have with me, if any. Totally possible to not, right?
Right.
And some people were not. They're like, I disagree, and I'm sorry that you felt that way. And I was like, got it. And that to me was the perfect indicator that like, we've cleared the air, and the result of that is nothing.
Right.
And that's fine.
Right. Wow, I love this. So how old were you when you did this? Because this is something that I think people would do only if they go to some type of like forgiveness workshop or something like that, because forgiving is really difficult for most people.
Yeah, I was 18. Yeah, I was 18, and I was working at like my school job. I had like a college job that I would do. And it was a lot of free time. I would just sit there and like check people in. And so I had a lot of time to think. And I read a lot, and sometimes like my mind just comes up with ideas that's like, oh, it would be really cool if I could do this. And then I ask myself, like, how would that look like, or how would that come to be? It was helpful. And like for 4 years of my life, like the rest of college, I was like this big free spirit. I was like such a hippie, and like giving love to everyone and not allowing other people's BS to like infiltrate my mental space. Yeah, I did a lot of like emotional soul healing at that time. Yeah.
Tonatiuh, that's really powerful. That's impressive, incredible, and wow, I commend you, because I'm one of those people who has struggled to forget people. And it took me years, I mean, way into adulthood. And I wish, honestly, I wish I would have thought of doing something like that, because I can imagine, I mean, now that I know, you know, forgiveness, you feel so much lighter, like this weight just comes off of you. And I remember hearing that for years, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Because I was still, I think part of you at some point wants to feel that rage as punishment for those people, right? But then you
Yeah, but
realize,
they don't feel it.
right, they don't.
Like, unless you're hate criming them, like they're not feeling it. Like, it's
right.
just you.
Right. Yeah. So was there anybody in particular who made an impact during those years that you were being bullied, aside from Michael? Was there somebody else?
Like a positive impact?
Right, a positive impact.
Oh my gosh, a plethora of people. Like, so many people would. I had the great fortune of being blessed with beautiful and loving human beings who were able to love me despite me not being able to love me. And it's still to this day, I'm gifted with them nonstop. I mean, I don't know if it's like karmic reward, or if it's like some angel my mom has bestowed upon me, but my whole life has been surrounded with beautiful human beings from and a lot of them are women, to be honest. A lot of them were women. My best friend's mom, Kaylee, or Kaylee is my best friend. Her mom, Cynthia, was a huge angel. So was Kaylee. Just a bunch of people. I mean, even down to like a cook, like the swiping lady at the university. She just saw, she had so much love for me and care. Yeah, I think it was just an ongoing thing. Kind of like I was spiritually blind.
Mm.
And so people were looking for me, like helping me see, if that makes sense. Until I could learn to see myself.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So looking back now, were there any signs or symptoms that you were experiencing during your bullying period that you wish somebody would have noticed?
I can't say that. I wish that people would have been more curious as to why something was happening as opposed to what was happening. So if I was angry, for them to be curious why I would react that way, or why I would say certain things, as opposed to trying to fix the what I was saying or what I was feeling. If that makes, there's a big difference there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I see that all the time. People focus on the action and not why children are reacting that way. And like I said earlier, children don't know, or sometimes are not taught how to express their frustrations or even to explain what's going on. Like you said, you know, you didn't know certain words, you didn't know how to tell people. But when we ask the why, we can find out a lot more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, you know, you have certain behaviors, and then instead of trying to wrong the behavior, explaining an alternative, you know, because I think that the words, like things like bad child, or like, you know, misbehaved, or malcriado, or whatever other, those words aren't particularly helpful. And they don't give an alternative. They're just tools of shame to get you to do the thing that they want you to do. But that's not good for a person's psychology, right? And so I think if I had a child, what I would do, like, let's say they threw a tantrum or something, then it's like, okay, so that happened. I didn't like that. And here's why I didn't like that. Like, when you yell like that, it actually makes it very hard for me to think or to communicate. And I have no idea what you're yelling about. So why are you yelling? Right. And so then they'll say something like, I don't know, I didn't get my favorite toy or whatever. And it's like, okay, do you think that when you behave that way, I'm going to give you the thing that you want? Like, do you think that would be helpful to you and to your end goal? Right. So then like, to empower the kid to start thinking critically about what choices they make. Right. And then it's like, okay, well, right now we're going to learn how to practice. Like, the feeling that you feel is disappointment. You're disappointed that you didn't get the toy. So I'm still not going to give you the toy, but a fun exercise that we're going to do is, what are you going to do with that disappointment? Right? Yeah. When this feeling comes up, I want you to learn how to deal with disappointment. So does that mean you're going to go on a run? Or do you want to draw? Or do you want to write it out? Or do you want to tell me that you're disappointed and explain why you're disappointed? Do you know what I mean? And so just to empower the kid to, like, teach them new things, because if you don't and you just give them the toy, then you're conditioning crying equals toy. Yeah, anyway.
I love that example you just gave. I'm pretty sure people who are going to be listening to this, if they have toddlers, especially right now, and they implement what you just taught them, it's going to be golden. That is beautiful. Thank you.
And mind you, it's not like it's still a child. And
Right.
children are crazy little animals who just want, you know what I mean? So yeah, you will probably, it won't work all of the time, but
Right.
once you start implementing and practicing it, I do think that eventually, as their brain develops, like they'll learn throwing a
Yeah.
tantrum is not the way.
Right. Yeah. And I know, so many parents never hear advice like this. And a lot of people tell me, well, why would I go and ask a person without children about parenting advice? And my answer to them is always because they see a different lens. Parents always have their parent goggles on, and sometimes they need to just remove them or at least go ask somebody else. And what I love what you just said, Tonatiuh, because it's something that I have heard it before, but the way you explain it is so clear. I love the example. And it comes, you can feel the love when you talk to a child like that, regardless of what they have done. Because my other focus when I teach parents about, bullying awareness is to make sure that the children, that they understand that the behaviors, even when they do act upon it and it was wrong, because of their attack, that they don't internalize that behavior as their identity, that
Right.
that they do not identify as that problem. And what you said too, that child, that problem child, el malcriado, all those stigmas can follow and injure that person even more. And there are a lot of kids who are bullied for such a long time and they get tired, they get fed up, and they're like, fine, this is how I'm going to survive. I'm going to do it back to everybody else. And that doesn't help anything. Yeah.
Well, that was Antonio.
Yes. Oh my gosh, he's intense. You just reminded me. Yeah, exactly. When I'm watching Promised Land and I see Antonio, I always think of that. Like he something, because he says it so much, that he was treated a certain way and that he was ousted and he's so angry, and he becomes that person that wants to hurt back because they feel like it's the fair thing to do, or maybe they're looking through healing. But the other thing I always advise is to talk about the scar, not the wound. Yeah. Talk about the scar, because the scar means you've already healed. It means you already did all the work. And if the wound is still open, sometimes you don't see things as clear as when you have the scar. And I love how you portray that character, because I use television media to teach, because that's what people will remember.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, sorry, I'm gonna make this a little louder. I mean, that's the whole reason that I got into acting, was because I recognized quickly that human beings don't understand the world outside of story. We don't. And like the old expression, monkey see, monkey do, it's the exact same thing, right? And so we look at stories and we look at samples in media and we're indoctrinated by what's right and what's wrong. When this happens, this is how you respond, et cetera, et cetera. And we live vicariously through other people. That's why, like, we're social creatures. Like, yes, chisme is no bueno, but we also learn through the mistakes of other people, right? And so there's something about, like, there's so many things that I saw growing up in television that I automatically was just like, wow. Like, for instance, okay, there are so many stories about coming out that ended in tragedy. People getting kicked out of their house, people experiencing violence, people getting murdered, et cetera, that it became a fear before anything even happened. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when I came out to my dad, my heart was racing. I was sweating. I was like ready to fight. Like I was like, oh shit, like I'm about to throw down with my dad, and that's not what happened. What happened is my dad was like, oh, okay, I love you, and hung up. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I think and maybe this is, I think that there's a huge wave of this happening right now with shows like Steven Universe, or even the most recent movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. We're really tapping into the responsibility of entertainment, right? You could still tell a really fun and entertaining story, but you're saying something. Mm-hmm. And showing people is an act of saying something, right? And so I think really thinking critically of the world that we want to create is important, and then showcasing that through entertainment is very important. And that's why things like the Don't Say Gay bill, or all these weird censorship things that are being presented as like, we have to protect our children from the sexual indoctrination of homosexuals. It's like, okay, if we want to protect children from sexual indoctrination, whatever that means, then no sexuality should be introduced, including heterosexuality. And if we really want to not talk about gender, we're going to get rid of all the boy bathrooms and girl bathrooms, and stop advertising things as boy toys and girl toys, and stop, you know what I mean? Because like, that is a form of social indoctrination. Your issue is with different forms that are out of the cis het norm.
Yes. I love it. Exactly. I always try to explain that to people, but you just explained it so well. And people don't really understand what big of a deal that is, that when you're saying that sexual indoctrination, ya no puedo decir la palabra.
Indoctrination, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's another side to it, and they don't want to accept it. Like you just said, if you're gonna not call it a, trans bathroom or a boys bathroom, don't call it boy or girl bathroom, just bathroom.
Yeah,
it doesn't have a sex. It doesn't have a sex, right? Just like toys. Right.
I mean, that was always like, it's funny because I don't know why I was always this way. Maybe because I was like I was very outspoken. Like, I'm willing to do anything if it's explained to me why I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. If I don't understand why I'm doing something, then I'm like, I'm good. But when I was a kid, I just loved dolls. I loved dolls. I loved little like people, and I would spend hours in the bathtub playing with them. And my mom would tell me like, oh, let's go get you the boy toy. And I was like, I don't want the boy toy. Also, like, what makes it the boy toy? Like, I don't understand. Or like I used to just love sparkly things. I mean, children love sparkly things regardless of gender. It's like shiny, And so I used to love sparkly toys or sparkly like shoes or whatever. And my mom was just like, well, that's a girl this or that's a girl that. And I was like, who says? Where? What book says that like this is the way that it has to be? Even down to, I remember in 7th grade, because I don't like any form of oppression. Like, I actually get very aggressive. I become aggressive when I see oppression. And I remember the principal stopped my best friend in 7th grade because she had jeans, but they were all cut up, but they weren't like showing anything. They were just like punk, it was punk style. And he told her not to wear those jeans anymore. And she's like, she just wore them again because she didn't care. And so he forced her to put on PE shorts and said that those jeans were not allowed in the school, and that she broke some rule, and he suspended her for disobedience. And so I was like, I literally grabbed the school, because like they give you like a little agenda with the school guidelines or whatever. And I grabbed it and looked at the code of conduct. And I was like, where does it say? You were making this up. And you were like, that's not fair,
I love that. I love that. And I mean, honestly, that makes no sense. If you have problems with somebody's pants being torn and then you give them shorts, which is usually something even shorter, that makes no sense, right?
She's showing more leg.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And see, that's a form of activism, and a lot of people don't see it as that. It's speaking up. And it's a very, very micro form of activism. It's something that I encourage parents to empower their children with, and themselves, of course. But I love it. I think I would have, my gosh, if you would have been in my high school, I would have been awesome, because we need more allies like that. And hopefully this story is motivating some kids at schools to speak up for the things that they see. Because some people think that it doesn't directly affect them if it's not happening to them, but ultimately it does. We see that everywhere in the world.
I mean, that's what happened to the Jews in Germany.
Mhm.
Like, oh, it doesn't affect us. Like, people acted like that, but it affected everyone. We are each other. Like,
Exactly.
I don't know. That I totally understand the diffusion of responsibility there, but honestly, like, that makes no logical sense.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's this idea of rugged individualism in the United States, maybe around the world. I'm not quite sure, but I can't speak for the whole global, you know, understanding. But there seems to be this rugged individualism where it's like, I'm on it on my own. I am like, if I don't make it by my bootstraps, whatever. And if I can do it, you can't too. And you're just lazy and you're this and you're that. And that's possible, but I think it's less probable. And it's also really selfish for us not to care for one another. Like, I don't like, or even things like, and sorry, not we didn't need to get to political, but like things like like protecting children. Okay, so like you totally believe in protecting children when they're in the womb, but once they're out of the womb, you can starve, or you can have no Medicare, or you can have no form of proper education, or no opportunity, or we're going to make sure that you, despite a 6% increase in inflation, keep the minimum wage at $7.25.
Right.
Like, yeah, you really care about the children.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
really are a good Christian. I love that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we can have a super long conversation, and I'm pretty sure some people get really ticked off. But
Well, it's just like, but that's another form of bullying in my mind, because I'm like, for me, it's a form of caring for one another, and what that looks like, at least for me, is like actually making sure that everyone's okay. But I don't know.
yeah, no, you make a really good point. I actually hadn't thought of those big issues as a form of bullying, because it's true, it's unwanted aggressive behavior sometimes, it is has a
Forcing
potential.
their will onto you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, they get to decide what you do with your body.
Exactly. Right. And it has a potential of being consistent, which we've seen. It's been consistent, taken away from the people who need it most. Yeah, really.
And
Thank
then
you
it
so much.
scapegoats people. Like, it turns people into like, oh, the reason this is like this is because of trans people, like they're at fault. Or, it takes one form of one person's identity and weaponizes it and shames them on the public sphere. And it's like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? If this is the land of the free, we're all created equal, then treat them with respect. You don't have to understand someone 100% to give them respect. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And are there any causes or anything that you're involved in right now that helps in a particular cause or interest that's personal
Yeah,
to you?
I've worked with a couple of really great organizations in the past. The Young Entertainment Activists is a really fun organization that's working on shaking things up inside of writers' rooms and in the industry to make it more eco-friendly, or to make it more LGBTQ plus forward, etc. Build Power is another really great organization. Obviously, Black Lives Matter is a really great organization. Raíces Texas is a really good one. Yeah, I haven't, like, it's been, because of the pandemic, it's been hard to balance that and acting all at once. But whenever I can, I lend my voice and my time to these really great organizations. This is just, it's sad. It's sad. Like, even like the kids who are being separated at the border from their parents, it's actually, that's beyond sad. It's like literally the definition of tragedy.
Right.
And the fact that the language for the justification of it is making someone illegal, or like they deserve this because they tried to protect their family is just a really hard, like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to justify that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that agree with it because they've bought into the way that that is presented, which is horrible. Because I always think of, maybe 50 years from now, when we look back to today and what was going on and where you stood on all of these issues. What will you think of yourself? What will you think of how your role played into what was going on and how it leads up to those 50 years in the future.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's challenging,
right.
And each decision that we make right now in the micro has a pretty heavy impact in the macro.
Definitely.
And we say things like, I think the Floyd protests were a wonderful example of both activism and performative activism. You can't go to a protest and march in the streets and systemically oppress people at the same time.
Yeah.
Even looking at our own interpersonal relationships, just amongst like our family, there are systems of oppression there. Forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do is a form of oppression. And that's not to say that like there could be other circumstances that we don't see, but I think that like there's small activist things that you can do daily in your own life. And sometimes it's checking yourself, like I had like a small instance where this person that I'm dating, and I, like, it wasn't huge, but I made a face at something that they said. And I kept thinking about it. And I was like, oh, I think because I have trauma around this specific space, I heard what you said and judged it. But if you were a different ethnicity, or if you were like a different religious background, I don't think I would have made that face. But because of that specific example, it had a reaction from me. And I was like, that was a form of bigotry. And I'm so sorry. I didn't know I had that blind spot there. Didn't have to turn into a big thing. Didn't have to like turn into an argument, but it was a moment where I was like, oh, I did something kind of shitty. My bad. I'll take full ownership over it. And thank you for like processing it with me.
Mm-hmm. And I think we all have that, because some people are like, no, not me. I'm very, very careful. But even the most careful people, things come out because society has ingrained all these things into our brain that we don't even realize it. Just like what you mentioned, all these different types of bullying, that's exactly what they are. And so when people come to me and tell me, even for school principals, they say, it's not a big deal here in the school, or one specific parent came to me and said, I need you to help me with the teacher. The teacher is bullying my child because my child has a learning difference and they're also immigrants. So, she explained, it was very obvious what was going on, those ingrained biases and prejudices. And, we were speaking to the principal and, oh no, she's really sweet. She would never do that. I've known her for 20 years. Impossible. The refusal to acknowledge that there's even a possibility that somebody who is known to be that kind person in a community could possibly have a bias or prejudice, and we all have them. And I think that's why it's so important for these micro activists to speak up and be allies to others. So you've given me so much. There's so much information here. I love this conversation. But I want to ask you, what is one of your most fond memories as a child?
No, I have so many.
That's a good thing.
Okay, the first one that comes to mind isn't, it wasn't really a child, but I was like 14, 15. And there was a hike that was near my house, and I loved going hiking there. My friends and I would go there all the time. And something about that hike just always made me want to run. Like I just wanted to like take off and just jog for forever. And I'd always tell my friends, hey, do you want to run with me? And they were like, no, we're good running. Oh goodness, no. Which is fine. And so one 4th of July, I told my family that I wanted to go on a hike. And so me and 6 of my cousins and an uncle all went. And there's a cliff jumping place. And we all cliff jumped together, which I was like, you guys are going to cliff jump with me? That's amazing. So we cliff jumped together. And then after the cliff jump, we were hiking back to the car. And I was like, I just want to run. So I told them, I was like, hey, I really feel like running. So I'm just going to run to the car. If you guys want to join me, like, cool. But if not, like, no worries. And without batting an eye, every single member of my family was like, yeah, let's run. And so we just like were jogging in the forest, like hooting and hollering, jumping off of rocks, being stupid, back to the car. And internally, I just felt this is my tribe.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. And what are some of your proudest achievements yet?
Oh, that is a challenging question because I don't celebrate my own achievements, unfortunately.
What?
I know I'm the worst. I don't call it the bullying. I don't know what it is. I'm not very good at like thinking I'm awesome. I don't know why. But I come from a family of immigrants. And when I think of where I started and where I'm at today, it really is kind of a miracle. So many other possibilities could have gone wrong, or I could have ended up somewhere else. I mean, for like a teenage kid to be like, I want to be an actor, not to be famous, not to be anything. And this is before TikTok, Instagram, whatever, you know, where people were doing it. And like really committed to it, got into a 4-year university. And I've lived on my own since I was 17 without ever going back, which is hard, especially for a Latina community, because like I think we're so family oriented and stuff. But I think I really was able to love what I do, and I did plays, and that inspired me to like get into TV, doing work that I love telling. I mean, Vida was a phenomenal show. Promised Land is a great show. And they have huge social impact. And so, yeah, when I think of coming from Boyle Heights, East LA, with an undocumented immigrant family, to being on the national stage, telling a story that has a huge impact on our community, that was like a big, hell yeah. And to see my grandma, who was born in 1935, and to be able to like be alive for her, or for her to be alive and show her me on a billboard.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty amazing.
Oh, I can imagine. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I said yet because I know for a fact you're going to do more amazing things. And I can't believe you don't celebrate your own wins.
I don't. I know
start.
my friends yell at me for it. My mom yells at me for it. Everybody yells at me because like in the back of my mind, and maybe this is helpful for you regarding the context of our conversation. For me, it's like never enough.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something more you can do. And this is something like the people have been saying about the progressive left, but it's like, don't throw away the good because it's not perfect. Like progress is still progress, despite it not being the exact thing that you wanted. you know? And I think that that's a similar mentality where I'm like reteaching myself and being gentle with myself to say, you should celebrate this. That was awesome. You could be proud of yourself, you know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If you could speak to young Tonatiuh, let's say maybe in the era when you were being bullied, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would just hug them.
Mm-hmm.
I would hug them and just say, there's nothing wrong with you. This has nothing to do with you. You know, I think it's really hard, especially when you have to learn how to defend yourself. Like, that's exhausting.
Absolutely. Big
That's
responsibility.
tiring.
Yeah.
And even being an activist, like you were talking about, like speaking out is a form of activism, which it is. I don't disagree. There's a price.
There is. Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very high price. And it can get really tiring. So I would love nothing more than to teach my younger self compassion for myself and teach them how to regenerate and like heal, you know,
Yeah.
after like exercising that level of like intensity and working that hard.
Yeah, I love that. And what about parents? What advice would you give to parents who have children right now just asking for help and they just feel like they don't know how to help?
I think, and mind you, like I'm just like making this all up right now, but I think stop seeing it as a problem. That is when you get into a defensive mode when things are a problem, and you like go into fight, flight, fawn, freeze to survive. See it as a game. Make it a game. Make it a game. Because then it's fun. Then there's levity. Then there's creativity. Then we're playing a game of like, you know, if so-and-so person is a bully to you, let's play a game. For every time they say something rude or offensive and you don't get triggered because you're not going to let them define who you are, we're going to keep track. And if he reaches 10 points in one day, we get a pizza party. So it's almost like, I hope that he like is a jerk, you know, or something, yeah. Because like, I'm going to get like, little do you know is that you're making my life even better with the people that I actually care about. And so like, I don't care what you're doing, because when we make it a problem, they become the priority. And so my question is, why are we giving this person any more power? You know, now there, as a parent, with the teachers, with the school district, absolutely make it a problem. But with your child, make it a game. Make it a game. Like, oh, can you believe they said this? Wow, let's look at like, let's be curious. Like, what do you think is happening in their life that they would think that they would think that way? Like, wow, so that's what oppression looks like. Have you ever seen oppression in other parts? Like, maybe let's look for it. Like, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, what have you done that could have possibly hurt someone else's feelings? Like, that's so cool. So that feeling sucks. Let's not be that person, you know? But I think that will help build a stronger relationship with you and your child and start instilling like, the problem isn't me, you know?
Right.
Or even be curious, like, oh, did I do something to upset them? No, I didn't. I didn't deserve this. And so learning I didn't deserve that is really helpful.
Thank you so much. All right, now we're gonna just wrap up. I have just a few more things.
Okay.
Before
Sorry,
you go.
I talk a lot.
No, I love this. I think people are gonna really, really enjoy this discussion. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question about how we can support you in case you have any upcoming projects, anything at all. And then we're gonna play a rapid Word game. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us, how can we support you? Or is there anything new? Is there a season 2 of Promised Land?
So we don't know if there's a season 2 of Promised Land just yet, but hopefully we will be releasing Promised Land in Latin America on Disney something Latino Plus. I forget what it's called.
I saw that.
But yeah, that's going to be coming out, I believe, July 27th. I have another project called Angeline where I get aged up to 56. So you get to see me looking like a silver daddy, baby.
Wait, where can we watch that?
So you can watch that show on Peacock on
Okay.
May 19th.
May 19th.
Angeline, yeah. And if you follow me on social media at I am Tonatiuh, that's Tonatiuh. I'm TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I'll be posting regarding it as soon as it comes up.
Got it. Ooh, I'll be tuned in. All right. Anything else?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Wow, that is so exciting. All right. And now for a rapid word question or a game. I'm going to throw out a word and you have to just, whatever the first word that comes to mind, just say it. Okay?
Okay.
No pressure. It's easy. All right. The first word is fun.
Bag. I don't know.
All right. Okay. That's what came up. Okay. Love.
Mom.
Oh, that's so sweet. Actor.
Me.
Influence.
Instagram. Ew, gross.
Adventure.
Ooh, hiking.
Life.
Food.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's it. That's the end of our game. Tonatiuh, this is incredible. I'm so honored that you have given a whole hour of your, actually more than an hour. Oh, I have one more. I keep meaning to ask you every time we speak, because your name is unique and a lot of people don't know what it means. Can you give us a little bit about that, please, to educate our public?
Yeah, for sure. So Tonatiuh is the Aztec sun god. And so the Aztecs, the Aztec mythology had it where they had different sun gods. So there was the god of water, there was the god of, I think jaguar. And so whenever that sun was no longer in power, the world would be consumed by those things. So there was a flood, or there was I think that they ate up all the jaguars. And so after the fourth sun, they were looking for someone to become the next sun. And so they had picked one of the bravest, strongest, craziest warriors to sacrifice themselves and become the sun to nourish the world. He was too scared, but a feeble person had no fear and threw themselves in to the flame, or to sacrifice themselves and become the sun. And they became the sun Tonatiuh, which is known as the sun of change. And the other person, to live in their shame, became the moon. And so Tonatiuh is the current sun that we're under. So it's the current era that we're under, and they're known for being the sun of change. But we don't really know what that means because of colonization and massacre. But that's the context of the name. And so how I take it to mean, it's we're in an era of change, and I interpret that as global healing. But we'll see.
Oh, wow. That is the perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you once again. If there's anything that I can do, or our Amigos Club on Clubhouse can do for you, you know how to get a hold of us. So thank you once again.
My pleasure.
I love that conversation so much, not just because I'm a fan, but because it was just very, very rich. I hope that Tonatiuh's story helps you understand how bullying has a place in this world and how you can stop it, because it impacts so many other social issues in the world. And while you might be listening right now saying, well, that never really bothered me, it never really impacted me, just think about it. How maybe the bullying that happened to somebody else might have affected your life, or maybe your environment, your community, your school. So yeah, there you go. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Tonatiuh on social media. The links are in the show notes, as well as the link to the new show he's going to be on. So thank you once again for listening in, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, did you like that episode? If you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening and write a review. If you want more tips or some behind-the-scenes videos, make sure to follow my mom at DaliTalks on Instagram. You can turn on notifications for her posts and stories as well. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. See you next time.